My girlfriend cheated on me with my father, and then I got an invitation. I thought I'd buried the past 6 feet under when I left that house. Turns out, some ghosts don't stay dead, they send you an RSVP instead. I guess every good revenge story needs a villain, right? Except in mine, there were two, one with my blood, one with my heart. You'd think when your girlfriend climbs into your dad's bed, your sense of betrayal would split you in two. But for me, it fused into something harder than hate: resolve. 6 months ago, I packed a single suitcase, walked past the family portraits lining the hallway, and didn't bother to close the door behind me. I didn't slam it either. That would have been too generous. I wanted the cold November wind to creep in and chill their celebration, maybe make their skin crawl while they lay tangled in sheets that should have been my mother's, if my father had any shred of loyalty left. She died 3 years prior, cancer, a slow, humiliating death that left him with enough pity points to justify needing comfort. Funny, I always thought that comfort wouldn't have my girlfriend's perfume on it. Her name's Claire. Classic name, boring taste in movies, freakishly good taste in betrayal. I met her my sophomore year of college. She was older by 2 years. I used to brag about that. She likes older guys, I joke with my friends. I guess I didn't realize how literal she'd take it. Maybe I should have caught on when she laughed too hard at my dad's lame jokes over Sunday barbecues. Or when I'd find them whispering in the kitchen while I was manning the grill, turning over burgers while my life got flipped on its back behind my own back. I didn't catch them in bed. I didn't get that cliché. Instead, my dad sat me down one morning, pouring me black coffee like we were two buddies about to share war stories. "I need to tell you something," he said. He sounded almost bashful, the way a teenager does when he's about to confess to egging a neighbor's house. Claire sat beside him on the couch, eyes downcast, her fingers knitting and unknitting the hem of her sweater. She didn't even look at me. "We didn't mean for it to happen," she whispered. My mug slipped from my hand. It shattered on the hardwood floor, but they didn't flinch. I remember thinking that was the worst part, the way they just sat there, braced for my rage, wearing it like armor. They'd planned it, rehearsed it. I'd love to say I screamed, that I punched my father right in the smug corner of his jaw. But I didn't. I stood there, sticky coffee seeping into my socks, shards glinting around my feet like teeth, and I realized I didn't have a single word left in my throat for either of them. So I left. I couch surfed for a while. Crashed with friends who didn't ask too many questions, though they all knew the broad strokes. Small town, big mouths. My dad's a lawyer, real estate and probate, and pretty well known around here. Claire worked at his firm. That's how they met. That's how they killed me. I got a dingy apartment 3 towns over. I buried myself in work, construction gigs during the day, dishwashing at night. Anything that would leave me too tired to think when I collapsed onto my futon at 3 a.m. I didn't answer calls from old family friends or curious cousins. I didn't go home for Christmas. Let them deck their halls. I hope they choked on the eggnog. Then last week, a cream-colored envelope arrived. No return address. My name scrawled on the front in Claire's loopy handwriting. I recognized it instantly. Inside, an invitation. Heavy cardstock, gold embossed edges, like they were inviting royalty. "You were cordially invited to the wedding of Claire Elise Parker and Robert Jonathan Ellis." My father's full name stared at me like a slap. They had the audacity to do it at our family home. My mother's garden, where she used to spend hours pruning her roses, now the backdrop for this train wreck in white lace. The same backyard where my 10th birthday party ended with my dad holding me on his shoulders so I could reach the piñata. I laughed. I swear I did. I sat at my rickety kitchen table and laughed until I scared my neighbor's dog into barking. Then I poured myself a whiskey, slid my phone across the table, and called the only lawyer I still trusted, my mother's brother, Uncle Grant. He didn't ask why. He just listened as I told him I wanted to check the house deed, the trust fund, every account my father ever touched. See, before my mother died, she made him put the house in a joint trust with me. It was supposed to be mine eventually. Turns out, my dad never bothered to update it. Maybe he didn't think he needed to. Maybe he figured I'd never come back for it. He figured wrong. Uncle Grant said he could have the paperwork ready before the weekend. Said if I wanted to make a scene, I could. And God, did I want to. So I polished my shoes. I ironed my best shirt. I RSVP'd, yes. And on the day of their vows, I'll stand in my mother's garden, the garden she planted, and I'll tell my father and my ex exactly what they mean to me now. Nothing. Except the house. That means everything. Because revenge doesn't taste good warm. It tastes divine when it's served ice cold on your wedding day. I didn't sleep the night before. Not out of nerves, not exactly, more like my mind wouldn't stop staging the scene. Over and over, I imagined their smug smiles, the polite applause, Claire's fake tears when she said, "I do." I pictured my father, hair slicked back like he was 25 again, pretending he wasn't twice the bride's age. I imagined them walking barefoot across the lawn where my mother's ashes were scattered. Yeah, they did that too, buried her under her favorite rosebush. Guess she's the third ghost at this circus. At dawn, I shaved. Clean lines. No stubble for them to sniff at like I was some stray dog who crawled back for scraps. I put on the same suit I'd worn to my mother's funeral. That felt fitting. This was a funeral, too, for any illusions they still had about me being the good son who'd just disappear. Uncle Grant picked me up in his Lexus at 9 sharp. He looked exactly how you'd expect a man named Grant Ellis to look: silver hair, pressed cuffs, a face that could make grown men sweat in a deposition. He handed me a coffee through the window and didn't say a word about the fact that my hands were shaking when I took it. We didn't talk much on the drive either. Just the occasional grunt from me and his fingers drumming on the steering wheel when we hit traffic near the church. He tried to convince me to serve them with papers before the wedding, quietly, with the dignity my mother would have wanted. But dignity had its day 6 months ago, when I left without slamming that door. Now I wanted noise. They weren't even doing a church ceremony, too formal, I guess, for a love born in deceit. They wanted rustic chic, so they turned my childhood backyard into a Pinterest spread, white folding chairs on either side of an aisle runner that cut through my mother's rose garden. Big stupid burlap bows on every chair. Fairy lights strung in the trees. I swear I could feel my mother rolling in her little patch of soil. There were maybe 50 guests milling around when we pulled up. Distant cousins, Dad's golf buddies, Claire's giggling coworkers. Most of them froze when they saw me step out of Grant's car. I heard my name a few times, hushed like an ugly rumor. Maybe they thought I'd come to beg for forgiveness, to weep at my father's feet and toast the happy couple. Grant parked right by the caterer's van, because subtlety wasn't on today's menu. He popped the trunk and handed me the envelope, thick, stamped with the court seal. Legal ownership. I was now the proud owner of the house, the garden, the land beneath their rented altar. All tidy and above board, signed and notarized yesterday. I felt oddly calm. Maybe that's what they never understood about me, that I don't yell when I'm angry. I just get quiet. And dangerous. We didn't mingle. We walked straight up the stone path to the back patio. The archway was draped in white linen. The chairs were filling up with people fanning themselves in the summer heat, gossiping about the black sheep who'd come home. Then I saw them. Claire was standing near the rosebush, veil already pinned, fussing with her dress straps. She looked smaller than I remembered, thinner maybe, or maybe just deflated in my eyes. The man beside her was no Father of the Year. Robert Ellis, ESQ, 6 feet tall, broad-shouldered, the kind of guy who always wore a blazer even when everyone else wore polos. Today, he was decked out in a 3-piece suit that probably cost more than my college tuition. He turned first. His eyes landed on me, and I saw the exact moment his smile cracked. Just a flicker, like he was seeing a ghost. Claire turned too, and for half a second she looked almost happy, like she thought maybe I'd come to forgive them, stand there and watch them promise forever. I smiled. I let them think it. I stepped onto the grass. My grass, technically, and nodded at the officiant, who looked like he wanted to crawl into his book and hide. Claire opened her mouth, but nothing came out. My father cleared his throat like he was about to deliver one of his courtroom monologues. Before he could speak, Grant stepped up beside me. He's old, but he projects a certain bulldog menace when he wants to. He raised his voice just enough for everyone to hear. Robert Ellis, he said, as of yesterday, the property deed was transferred in full to your son. You are no longer the legal owner of this house or any land attached to it. Gasps. Actual gasps, like we were in a soap opera. My father's mouth opened, closed. Claire reached for his arm like she needed to steady herself on something solid. Too bad she'd bet on a man whose foundation was as rotten as his fidelity. I'm going to ask you nicely, I said finally. My voice was steady, clear, the same voice I'd practiced in my head all night. Pack up this circus and get off my lawn. The ceremony's over. My father's face went crimson. You ungrateful. Grant cut him off. If you refuse to vacate, we'll have law enforcement here in under 30 minutes. And trust me, Robert, you do not want to explain that headline to your colleagues. Claire tried to speak. Her lip trembled. Please, can we just talk? I looked at her veil, the cheap pearls at her throat, the lipstick smudged at the corner of her mouth. I thought about all the nights I'd driven myself half-mad replaying her laugh, wondering if she'd faked every I love you. No, I said. There's nothing left to say. And just like that, the guests started to scatter. Chairs scraping, whispers hissing through the garden. A few of Dad's friends gave me these awkward half-salutes as they hurried past. No one wants to stand too close to a bomb when it goes off. My father stared at me, chest heaving, jaw tight like he was clamping down on a scream. Claire started crying for real then. Big, ugly sobs that would have gutted me a year ago. Now they just sounded like justice. Grant put a hand on my shoulder. You ready? He murmured. I didn't answer. I just stood there, right in the middle of my mother's roses, while my father and my ex-girlfriend packed up their wedding and scurried off my lawn like raccoons caught in the trash. Some victories come with a parade. Mine came with silence. It's funny. You imagine revenge as this roaring thing, a fire that crackles so loud it drowns out the ache. But once the last chair was folded and the catering van wheeled out of my driveway, all I heard was the wind rustling through rose bushes my mother planted 20 years ago. and my heart thudding against my ribs like it hadn't quite gotten the memo that it was over. Grant lingered behind while the last vendor, some teenager with a truck full of fairy lights, mumbled an apology and practically ran over his own foot trying to get out of there. The yard looked like a battlefield at dawn. Scraps of confetti, half-empty champagne flutes, a dropped shoe in the grass like Cinderella never made it to midnight. I leaned against the porch railing and watched my uncle scribble something on a legal pad. Always working, that man. Even after pulling off the stunt of the century, he couldn't help jotting down notes for whatever storm Dad would try to cook up next. Maybe there'd be lawsuits, petty threats, who cared? The deed was ironclad. The house was mine. The garden was mine. The ghosts? Well, those stayed no matter who held the keys. You did it, Grant said finally, looking up at me over his glasses. They won't be back. He knows he can't fight this. I know. My voice came out hoarse. 6 months of swallowed rage will do that to you. Grant nodded like he wanted to say more, but thought better of it. He slipped the legal pad into his briefcase and snapped it shut. You want me to stay? Help you lock up? Clean up? No. I cut him off, more sharply than I meant to. I caught myself. Sorry. I need to be alone with it for a bit. He studied me, the way he used to when I was a kid, and scraped my knees and lied about how it happened. He always knew when I was hurting. He didn't push then either. Call me if he tries anything, he said. And, be careful tonight. You know how your father gets. I know. I knew better than anyone. He clapped my shoulder once, hard enough to feel like a punctuation mark. Then he got into his Lexus and drove off down the winding gravel drive, tires crunching over the petals Claire's florist had so carefully scattered. They looked like little pieces of skin in the dusk. I stood there for a long time, until the sun dipped behind the sycamores and the garden sank into that eerie hush you only get when a party ends but the house still remembers the noise. I could practically hear the echo of my 10th birthday, my mother's laughter as she lit candles, my dad's booming voice pretending to be the hero of it all. Lies. Or maybe just illusions, which is worse when you think about it too long. I don't know how long I drifted through the yard, kicking aside ribbons and bits of torn napkin. I found Claire's bouquet half-trampled near the rose bush, and, for some reason, I picked it up. Pale pink roses. She'd once told me she hated roses, said they were too obvious. Guess some cliches are convenient when you're playing bride in a stolen garden. I set the bouquet down on my mother's grave. Not that there's a headstone. She hated that idea, said she wanted to be part of the earth. So we buried her ashes under the biggest rosebush, the one she'd started from a cutting she smuggled out of her mother's garden back when she was just my age. I crouched there, dirt biting through my dress pants, and let my fingers rest on the damp soil. Hey, Mom, I whispered, feeling stupid and angry all at once. You'd love this, wouldn't you? Your husband screwing the babysitter and me playing sheriff in your flower beds. The wind answered. Or maybe it didn't. Maybe I just needed to hear something. Anything that sounded like permission to stop being so damned angry. But nothing came. Just the smell of damp earth and roses so ripe they almost smelled like rot. I sat there until my knees ached. When I finally stood up, I wiped my hands on my pants and looked back at the house. The lights were all off. They'd set it up that way for the reception, so the garden lights would feel magical. Now it just looked like a mausoleum. Inside, everything was exactly as I remembered. The ugly paisley couch, the grand piano my mother never learned to play, the framed wedding photo of my parents on the hallway table. I stood in front of that photo for a long time. My mother in white satin, smiling like she'd just won the lottery. My father with his arm draped so casually around her waist, like she was just another trophy on his shelf. I wondered if he'd smiled like that today when Claire pinned his boutonniere to his lapel. I wondered if he'd even bothered to think of Mom when he chose this day to marry the girl I brought into this house. Maybe that's the worst part. I think he did remember. I think he just didn't care. I didn't have a plan for what came next. I'd thought so much about today that I hadn't left room for tomorrow. I could sell the house, take every penny, salt the earth behind me, vanish into the city. Or I could stay, plant new roses, fill the place with laughter that didn't come with a knife in the back. Or maybe I'd just exist here for a while, a ghost haunting my own memories until they bored me enough to leave. I climbed the stairs to my old bedroom. It still smelled faintly like stale cologne and old books. My trophies were still lined up on the shelf. Soccer, debate team, the kind of plastic accolades parents keep to convince themselves they raised someone worth bragging about. I sat on the edge of the bed that hadn't been slept in for 6 months and let my shoes thud to the floor. No more couch surfing. No more dish pits in overtime. For the first time in half a year, I was home. Whatever that meant now. I lay back and stared at the ceiling. The cracks in the plaster formed constellations I'd traced with my eyes as a kid. I wondered if Claire was crying somewhere in a motel room tonight, if my father was screaming at her, blaming her for ruining the perfect plan. Or maybe they were comforting each other, telling themselves they'd bounce back, find a new house, start again. Good luck to them. I hope the next garden bites them back. I drifted off sometime near dawn. My last thought was a simple one, almost childish in its pettiness. I hope they know they'll never set foot here again. Morning came with the smell of old wood and dust motes swirling in slanted sunlight. It didn't feel like victory. It felt like waking up in a mausoleum built from every lie I'd ever believed about family. I lay there for a while, my mother's rosebushes blooming somewhere below my window, their scent sneaking in through the cracked glass. You'd think that smell would be comforting, but to me it just felt heavy. Sweet and rotten all at once, like something beautiful that shouldn't be here anymore, but is, because no one bothered to rip it out at the roots. I dragged myself out of bed and padded barefoot down the hall. The carpet was worn thin where my father used to pace during late-night calls. How many times had Claire sat on that same carpet, giggling at something he whispered when he thought I was asleep? The thought made my stomach twist. In the kitchen, I made coffee in my mother's old drip pot. The smell at least gave me something warm to stand behind. I found her favorite mug in the cabinet, chipped on the rim, faded blue flowers clinging to the ceramic like they were too stubborn to die. I wondered if Claire ever drank from this mug while I was out working double shifts to pay rent on that cramped little apartment we'd shared. Probably. I sat at the kitchen table, the same one where my father had told me, "Calm as you please," that he'd fallen for my girlfriend. Where Claire had stared at her folded hands while my life cracked open like an egg dropped on linoleum. I traced a circle in the dust with my fingertip. One loop, then another. Something about the rhythm felt grounding stupid, maybe, but it kept me from hurling the mug at the wall. Halfway through my second cup, my phone buzzed. Unknown number. For a second I considered ignoring it. I'd had enough surprises to last me a lifetime, but curiosity is a rotten itch. Hello. There was a pause, then Claire's voice spilled into my ear. "Finn. Raw. Can we talk?" I didn't answer right away, just stared at the steam rising from my coffee. I imagined her, probably in some cheap motel room off the highway, wearing yesterday's smeared mascara like a badge of shame. What could you possibly have left to say, Claire? She inhaled shakily. I hated that I could still recognize that sound. The same tiny gasp she'd make when she pretended to be sorry about working late, when she was really at his office, doing God knows what. "Please. Just 10 minutes. Where's Robert?" She flinched at the name. I heard it in the silence that followed. "He's at his brother's. We're not exactly talking right now." A flicker of vindictive delight sparked in my chest, so bright I almost laughed. But I didn't. I just set the mug down and waited. "I need you to understand," she said, voice cracking. "I didn't plan for this. I didn't mean to fall for him. I was lonely. You were always working." "Don't," I snapped. The word came out sharper than I intended, but I didn't pull it back. "Don't you dare make this about me not being around enough. I didn't cheat on you." Silence again. I heard her sniffling. I wondered if she'd wiped her nose on the sleeve of one of his shirts. "I know," she said finally. "I know I ruined everything. I didn't think you'd actually take the house." I barked out a laugh. "Of course you didn't. You thought you'd stand in my mother's garden and promise forever to my father, and I'd just crawl back to whatever hole I'd dug for myself." Well, surprise. I expected her to snap back, to call me cruel or vindictive. Instead, her next words made my skin crawl. "I'm pregnant." 3 words. That's all it took to drag me right back to that sticky floor, coffee mug in pieces around my feet, no words left in my throat. I squeezed my eyes shut, pinched the bridge of my nose like I could press the rage out through my skull. I should have hung up, but I didn't. I forced the words out, flat and cold. "Not my problem." "It's not. I'm not asking for anything," she stammered. I wanted you to know. I didn't want you to find out from someone else. He's not taking it well. He says I ruined everything. He says I trapped him." I bit down so hard on the inside of my cheek that I tasted blood. "Good." She went quiet. "Then, you really hate me, don't you?" I let the silence stretch. Let her sit with it. "No," I said at last, because it was true. "I don't hate you, Claire. I hate what you did. I hate that I let you into my life. I hate that you made my father's worst parts worse. But you're nothing to me now." She sobbed once, sharp, wet, pathetic. "Where will we go?" "Not my house. Not my problem." I ended the call. Let the phone thud to the table like it weighed 100 pounds. My pulse roared in my ears. Pregnant. Of course she was. Maybe it was true. Maybe it wasn't. Maybe it was her last-ditch attempt to win back some pity, force my father to crawl back to her motel bed, promise her a new house to wreck. Not my problem. I stood and poured the rest of my coffee down the sink, watched it swirl into the drain like dirty water carrying ghosts away. Then I did the only thing that felt right. I grabbed a pair of gardening gloves from under the sink, stepped out into the morning sun, and knelt in my mother's rose garden. Petals brushed my arms, the scent thick and cloying. I dug my fingers into the soil, pruned the dead blooms, cut back the thorny vines that strangled the healthy stems. It hurt. The thorns nicked my wrists, left tiny red scratches like tally marks. I stayed out there for hours, sweat dripping into my eyes, until the garden looked half alive again. until I felt half alive too. When I finally stood, my back aching, I realized something that tasted like freedom. This place was mine now. And no ghost, no liar, no cheating father or weeping bride was ever setting foot here again. I spent the next few days in that house like I was living inside a scab I couldn't stop picking at. I boxed up old photo albums, wiped dust off picture frames I should have burned. I found Claire's toothbrush in the upstairs bathroom, bright pink, cheap plastic, and threw it in the trash with a satisfying thunk. I half hoped she'd come back for it. She didn't. Uncle Grant called every other day, checking in like I was some fragile heir who might shatter under the weight of his inheritance. He hasn't tried to contact you, has he? She hasn't shown up, has she? No and no. Cowards never come back for the wreckage. They just circle the next warm body like vultures. I didn't answer the door when my father's brother showed up with a bottle of bourbon and some hollow apology. I watched him from the upstairs window as he knocked, called my name, left the bottle on the porch like a peace offering to a ghost who didn't want peace. I let the bourbon sit out there for 3 days before I dumped it down the drain. I don't want his gifts. I don't want his anything. Most nights I couldn't sleep. I'd wander the halls in my socks, trailing my fingertips along the grooves in the wood paneling, half expecting to hear my parents' muffled arguments echoing through the walls. Sometimes I'd catch my own reflection in the dark window glass and flinch at how much I looked like him. The hairline, the shoulders, even the jaw, same stubborn line, same bite when pushed. When I couldn't stand the inside anymore, I'd drag an old lawn chair out to the yard and sit under the fairy lights they'd strung up for their wedding. I left them there on purpose, a rotten little trophy. At night, they looked like stars snagged in the trees. Beautiful in that fake, dying way all fairy lights are. One night, maybe a week after I kicked them out, I found myself standing by my mother's rosebush again. The moon turned the petals ghost white. I swear I could almost see her there, kneeling in the dirt like she used to, humming off-key while she trimmed deadheads and cursed at the weeds. She'd hated weeds more than anything. Said you had to rip them up by the roots or they'd just keep coming back. I whispered it out loud before I could stop myself. I got rid of them, Mom. It felt stupid, but it also felt true. And for once, I didn't feel her ghost judging me. If anything, the garden seemed to breathe a little easier. Like the soil knew it was safe again. 2 days later, an envelope showed up in my mailbox. No return address, but I knew the handwriting. My father's, all blocky and precise like a man used to signing deals that hurt other people more than him. Inside, a single sheet of paper. No apology. No begging for forgiveness. Just a check. $50,000, made out to me. Memo line, for your trouble. I laughed so hard I scared the crows off the fence. I didn't cash it. Didn't rip it up either. I framed it. Hung it in the downstairs bathroom, right above the toilet. Every time I take a piss, I get to look my father's money in the face and remember that he tried to buy my silence. Like my rage was just another asset he could liquidate. It's petty. I don't care. Petty keeps you warm when family turns you cold. After that, they left me alone. I heard whispers from old neighbors that Claire moved in with a cousin 2 towns over, that my father took a leave of absence from the firm. He'll bounce back. Men like him always do. But not here. Not ever again under this roof. Sometimes I wonder about the kid, if there really is one. If there is, it'll grow up with my father's smile and Claire's crocodile tears. Maybe it'll find its way here one day, knock on my door, ask why it's father, and I don't speak. Maybe I'll tell it the truth. Maybe I'll tell it nothing. Maybe I won't even be here. I don't know what happens next. That's the truth they don't tell you about revenge. You plan every step of the strike, but you never plan what comes after. Nobody writes a guidebook for the aftershocks. So I make it up as I go. Some mornings I open all the windows and let the rose scent roll through every room until the house smells like her again, my mother, not Claire. Some nights I sleep on the couch just to remind myself that I'm not running anymore. Sometimes I think about ripping out every last bush and pouring salt on the garden, but I never do. She loved them too much. There's an old Polaroid on my nightstand now, me at 7, grinning with a gap in my front teeth, my mother kneeling behind me, arms wrapped tight around my shoulders. My father took that photo. I keep it there not because I forgive him, but because I don't. It reminds me that some things can't be rewritten just because the villain wants a fresh chapter. This house is mine. The soil, the memories, the ghosts, all mine. I'll let the roses grow wild if I want to. I'll tear them out if I want to. That's the point. They thought they could take everything and leave me with nothing. Instead, I'm the last one standing in this garden of thorns. And every time I breathe in the scent of those stubborn, beautiful blooms, I remember exactly who I am. The son who stayed. The boy who left. The man who came back. And the one who locked the door behind him for good.